This is the first time we've really been able to welcome people into our space. So I just want to say thank you so much for making the trip. Thank you for being part of Climate Week. It's been a truly inspiring week, seeing everyone just in this community coming together and really deciding to do something about it. And I couldn't think of a better topic to be speaking on today because, in fact, I really love food. I'm sure we all do. To the point where when I was in university, I actually decided before second year, I was like, I don't want to eat crap food. So I went to George Brown and did night classes to learn how to cook properly. And it's been a skill that's paid me back over and over and over. And what I've found through my life is that there's nothing more connecting than food. So when thinking about Toronto Climate Week and how we connect with each other, I can think of nothing better than a little talk about food to really get us in the right direction. So with all that being said, I'm so excited to introduce Puneeta. She's a Canadian sustainability expert, a speaker, a TV contributor. Her debut cookbook, which is here, beautiful book, and beautifully written, is, my goodness, it's a Globe and Mail and National Post top cookbook of 2024. It was presented as the prestigious Toronto International Festival of Authors and has been widely featured in publications around the world. So we're incredibly lucky to have her here. And today we're going to talk about something that touches us every 3 to 4 hours probably, which is how our food choices impact both our well-being and the planet. So I guess we're going to start off with a really easy question, which is, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the inspiration for why you wanted to write Good Food, Healthy Planet.
Oh gosh, thank you for that warm introduction, Sanders. This is beautiful. Your home, your office is beautiful. Thank you for having me here. It's an incredible feeling to sit here with you and in front of everyone, talking about two of my favorite topics, food and planet. Right? Food and planet. The book, Good Food, Healthy Planet, came about, it started off as a dream. I was talking to a friend about how we think about food and how we think about good food, especially as parents. We think about, food that's good for our kids and have the right minerals and vitamins and needs to have carbs and proteins and all of that, right? The boxes that we check that we think are good food. But growing up as I did and learning as I had done over the years, many years before that, I knew in my heart that good food had to be about more than just how it affected us and our body or our kids' bodies. It was about more than that. It was about how it was grown, how much water, how many resources went into growing that food, and the sunlight and the soil and the planet and the transportation, the distribution, the carbon emissions, and all of these, complicated sounding words, they all went into making that food good. And then as I was learning, I was also learning about how food and what we ate impacted our mood, food and mood. I talk about the food and mood research in my book. And so all of that kind of came together, and I'm thinking I need to write this book because I didn't grow up in India. I mean, I didn't grow up in Canada. That's a spoiler. I grew up in India, and my dad was in the Indian military, and he moved every 18 months. And that's part of the army life. Like my brother and I got so accustomed to uprooting, new school, new city, new home. My mom would unpack the kitchen first because that's just how it worked out. And I got really good at uprooting and transplanting and repotting again and again. And there's some research out there now. Dr. Sharon Blackie, if anyone else reads her work, she calls people like us serial rooters who get used to putting down roots, right, in different places. And while I was doing all of that, I was also learning. My first degree was in economics. Loved the subject, especially the topic of trends. was one of micro and macro trends, if there are any economists here. Loved it because it gave us a great picture of what society could look like and then look forward. Amazing, but I knew I didn't want it to be my career. And so I gathered another degree, Master's in Tourism Management, which is a business degree. Moved multiple cities, countries, and then a few years ago I took a break. I started writing. So from corporate life to being an artistic writer was a big transition for me. And in 2018 was one of those, those milestone memories that everybody talks about, the foundational memories and
The core memories.
the core memories,
Yes.
right? So for me, that was 2018 when I read the UN IPCC report, which came out. This was one of the first, and there's a bunch of, pretty much everybody here is interested in climate, but the report that came out in 2018 was one of the first few where they talked about the 1.5 degree target that we had to avoid. It wasn't a target that we wanted to reach, right? Climate scientists were talking about, what we could do. And it was more than just one of their regular reports, because honestly, climate scientists had been talking about global warming for decades before that. But it was a place where they shared a roadmap for organizations, public policy makers, and for the people in their personal lives what they could do. And that was the switch flipped. And then, of course, COVID happened, and like many of us, I did an online course. Right?
Guilty.
Lockdown
Yeah.
and so on.
Yeah. How everyone's got they're like, I've still got my sourdough starter in my freezer.
So I, spoiler alert again, I did not make sourdough. I fermented yogurt. So I fermented milk and I tested the heck out of, millions of pots of yogurt.
Amazing.
And it's in the book,
And
what I found out. Yeah.
one of the things you talk about in your book, and I think it's really fascinating, I think anyone who's had a child, like I've got a 3-year-old, almost 3-year-old at home, is about how food can impact your mood, and there's impacts in food that go beyond just nutrition, and you talk a lot about that in your book. So yeah, tell me more about that.
I did, and so that was a course I did in 2020, which was food and mood, because at that time the world was talking about the climate crisis, and we were also talking about the mental health crisis at the same time, which was being revealed to us as we got deeper into COVID, right, or into that stage of mask wearing. And so food and mood, there's this incredibly smart person who is the director of an enormous school in Australia called Food and Mood Center. It's part of the Deakin University, and she did multiple year research that they call the SMILES trial, which basically found out that food and what we ate and how it impacted our gut health directly impacted our mental health. Because we have something called the gut and brain axis, and gosh, they're deeply connected. So what we're eating, probiotics, prebiotics, vitamins, minerals, all of that, they directly connect with how we feel. So she is a nutritional psychiatrist, and again, for those the research geeks out there, there's a lot of resources cited at the back of the book. But that was really important for me to help bring that together, because people and planet work together. Right?
Yeah, and speaking to that, I think in your cookbook you talk a lot about how the science that informs the writing that you have here, and obviously for anyone who's played the little game over there, you probably know, but maybe you can talk a little bit about how some foods have much higher climate impact than other foods.
Well, I was trying to answer 3 questions when I was writing this book. Can we eat to save our body? Can we eat to save our mind? And then thirdly, can we eat to save the planet? And incidentally, coincidentally, wonderfully, and easily enough, like the food that does all of those things is the same food. And it is the same food that is low in carbon emissions. It's the same food that, like beans and pulses, all of that, which I'm giving you the answers to Sanders right there. Right?
Totally. But
yeah.
it matters. I think it's important to understand the science, right? Because, it's funny, like I created this silly game on Monday, and it's about trying to figure out what the different carbon intensities of food are, right? And even people on our team who are going through it, you really learn that, for example, farmed shrimp may not be as good for the environment as you might think, right? I think there's the obvious culprits around beef, but it's really, I think, when you're trying to do right by the climate, obviously greenhouse gas is just one part of it, but I think we're living in a world where science is kind of under attack, and I think it is important to kind of reinforce the fact that you can make a difference through your choices.
Yes, and you're right about science being under attack. Like there's so much misinformation and disinformation out there that it is, it's really, it needs people to, we need to know what the conversation, who is delivering that message to us, and what the intentions are. And we also need to know what's important for ourselves. And this was something actually we were going to talk about later, but I talk about the big why a lot in my book. It's literally like the first section of the book, why things are important, and science is a big part of that. But I think just as all of us individuals, we need to know why we are doing whatever it is we are doing. Like when we're setting up Toronto Climate Week and building a tent for the world, well, that's the why, right? Making sure that there is clarity in science and data, and people have the data they need, the information they need to make the right decisions and make choices. That's Carbonhound. Look, we need to know what the why is for ourselves, and it can get, the world is a little bit messy right now, right? There's so many distractions. It's called a values exercise. I just call it the big why. Go home today and see if there is any quiet space that you can sit down and think about what you want to do and why you want to do it, and then just do it.
But it's true. I've never been in climate before this business, right? And I think, it is possible for literally anybody just to go get educated. Chris was my teacher. He's in the back there. I literally went to night school to learn GHG accounting from Chris, and, because I just decided to start to do something, right? And we've all got skills to contribute to this, and you don't need to have a background in climate to make an impact. You just have to be open to learning more about it and dive deep into it when you do. Which I think brings us on to a really interesting point, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions and myths around kind of what makes a difference. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
We'll be prepared a little bit beforehand. So I don't have to open the book and look at it. But one of the biggest myths is organic food, really. We think that we have to buy organic food, right? I remember when my oldest, who's now 19, she started eating strawberries. She was, I think, 2. And she used to put away, I think, a clamshell, a pound of strawberries.
They're so good.
They're so good. They're so good. But we lived in Calgary at that time, and I remember this was January, and she was in her high chair, and to try and get strawberries that were organic in the middle of Calgary, Alberta winter, the idea that and if I wanted to make it organic, right? Now I know, after all of the research that I've been doing, this is something, we have to make the choices that we do, right? We want strawberries in January, and they're delicious and they're yummy. But at the same time, like when they are being grown locally, greenhouse grown, they are going to need a lot of energy, space, control, a controlled environment to try and replicate the temperatures that strawberries need, which is what, June, beautiful 15-degree temps in the middle of winter in January. So maybe we can make do with cold storage, boring apples, because we have to, right? Because when we look at the numbers, it's just, we can't afford that type of food anymore. We can't afford to use up our dwindling resources in a way that we can. And when we have the numbers, and when we have the internal knowledge too, that this is not seasonal. Indigenous people have told us that eat seasonally, but what that actually means in real life. But all of this kind of works together to help translate it for us.
Totally, and I feel like it's this constant misconception. I think one of the myths that I see all the time is that doing right by the climate actually costs you more.
Mm-hmm.
And I think seasonal food's a great example where it's actually way cheaper. I love going to the grocery store, just looking at these big bins in the front and just being like, perfect, all this is cheap, and most of the time it's local. And so it's just an easy decision, and then that kind of informs what you're making that week. Of course, my wife got a little tired of butternut squash soup, but
I'm still getting my boxes from the farm. So it's butternut squash, acorn squash. It's going to be squash all the way till December.
Yeah, I know. Anyways.
I have a really good squash recipe.
But to me, I mean, even things like, and again, we have to think there's obviously different things that we're optimizing for. So I think when we think about climate, it's really interesting because, especially being at a business like Carbonhound, we think about emissions, right? But so when we're thinking about emissions, well, what's something that everybody does every day that actually doesn't have a big emissions impact is recycling, actually, right? So everyone's like, oh, I recycle, I'm doing the right thing. It's like, yeah, but your car is actually doing, exponentially more in terms of emissions than your recycling habits do. So I'm glad that you're sorting it, but it's not actually moving the needle when it comes to your behaviors. Where if you eat a little bit less meat and spend less time in a car, you'd actually think about alternate forms of transportation. You can make a much bigger impact. And so I think the point being is that I think we have to really think about this kind of integrative way of thinking where it's not just about the GHG and the climate aspect, but we also want to reduce waste, and that's what recycling is great for. And we also want to reduce, the water use that we have as well, and that's really important too. So it's like trying to figure out how we combine these three different lenses, and it's not necessarily, right or wrong, but there's definitely, we can get better, I think, at looking at things through different lenses in order to come up with a better solution for ourselves.
Yes, and looking at things only from greenhouse gas emissions perspective, or looking at things just from the one lens is not how this is going to resolve for us. We do need to look at all different aspects of how we are. I mean, for me, the basic highlights are often use less, consume less, buy less, thrift more, and whatever we waste, try and build a self-sustaining environment, because that's where we are missing the big picture. Like, all of our waste could be used to generate new for us again. That's how, there's different words for it: regenerative, circular, self-sustaining. They're very smart people who call it all different things.
Or do that to make some money off it. So that's okay though.
Yes.
But it's important. You have to have the language to be able to describe the new world that we want to live in, because it's obvious that the language we have now is very linear, very consumerist, and it's not going to lead us to the place that we need to get to.
Yes.
But speaking of things that in terms of the food context, you were talking about how food's kind of just the beginning, and there's these other pieces of the puzzle that we want to consider as well.
Yes. So the eating with benefits.
Well, think about the packaging, transportation.
Oh gosh, yes.
Yeah.
So no more plastic. Like if we're thinking of three things that we want to swap out, I would put plastic right at the top, because food is one part of it. The other part is, what the food comes in, right? And plastic packaging. I travel to various places outside of North America often, and I see the alternatives being used, even on airlines mid-air. We're being given in other, like not Air Canada and an American airline, but in other airlines, Asian airlines, paper and compostable materials are being offered just as the norm. So there are a lot of things that we can look at that can be our quick ways to resolve, to make some headway, because there's a lot that can be done. I mean, that's the wonderful part. I will say, like, climate is one of those things that is so foundational. It has tentacles. I wish I had a better word. But it has, tentacles if someone has a better word, chip in. Roots, it has roots.
Or tendrils, yeah.
Or tendrils, yes, because I wanted to go up rather than like down, like roots do, but good suggestion. But climate is a foundational, is our foundation. So if it has tendrils into every different industry, then the solutions that we can approach it with also can be from every different industry. Like interdisciplinary, like this is a beautiful word that I came across yesterday. Someone mentioned it at the university, and everyone, we can start wherever we are, whatever work we're in, whatever our day job is. And if we don't have one and we're going home and feeding our kids, if you're a single mom working at McDonald's, if you're double income, no kids, dinks, they used to be called.
I mean,
yeah.
So you're started talking a little bit about business. I'm just curious, how can business leaders kind of go beyond individual action to drive change?
It's the same strategy. It's the same strategy that we can use at a personal level, where we get together. First, we start individually, and then we look at what we can do at a larger scale. But it's also, look at our business model, see where the waste is, where can we reduce energy consumption, plastic that's coming in, new plastic that's coming in, and food waste. I mean, those three are the low-hanging fruit, as, again, smart people call them, only because we can tackle them really quickly. And we can wait for public policy to come in and change recycling rules and make sure we're using only FSC certified paper or recycled paper. But what if we didn't wait for the politicians to get up to speed? We get it, and we all have wonderful jobs. We can do this.
You also have I think you've got a little guide for how to green your lunchroom as well, which,
I do.
as a little teaser, we're going to be sending that out to people after this event as well. So take a look at that. It's going to be really cool. And it's funny because when we were doing this event, you're like, okay, gosh, how are we going to do this, right? So I'm like looking up the carbon intensity of cans versus PET for our drinks, and we're running through like, oh, San Pellegrino, no, can't do that. It's got to be Buble, right? So I think when you're thinking about events, there's a lot of waste that can come from events, and so thinking about like aluminum's 100% recyclable, right? So how can we get these reusable? And maybe you're renting silverware as well. So trying to buy less and kind of leverage those opportunities to think about having a downtown location for your event so people can take public transport, for example. There's all these decisions that you can make, especially on the event side, that can really have an impact. I think, what was it? I think we've, just with the way that we did this event, we've probably saved, 500-800 kilometers worth of travel time in terms of CO2. For a car, which is pretty cool.
Yes.
So I'm not sure if you want to talk about the how anymore, but I know that you wanted to, maybe you can talk, we've got a little food fact wall over here. So if kind of just bringing this to daily life, if we want to start tomorrow, what are kind of 2 or 3 easy, affordable swaps that people might be able to take to have a real impact?
So part of writing the book, a cookbook, I also created the diagram that's up on the wall that's called Eating with Benefits. I call it the heart of the book often, only because it's so easy to customize and kind of shift it to how you want it to be. It's designed like a spice box, an Indian spice box, and the intention was when you cook, you don't always use the same spices every time, and you don't have to use all 5 either, so you can kind of pick and choose. So I've got 5 in there. I've got, I'm gonna have to read this off, right? I've got,
You need glasses.
yeah, my glasses. Memory. 51-year-old woman will rely on memory. That's the headline there. Well, reduce meat, half your meat, wherever we are. Like, that's a big one. I would start with that. Eat more lentils, eat more beans. That's no surprise to anyone. The third thing I would suggest is try something new, because surprisingly enough, having a diverse diet, we think, having a diverse diet is great for our gut health because it adds to the variety of our bacteria in our gut, which is amazing. And I talk about it more in the book, but listen to the doctor who I cite in the book. So eat a diverse diet, but that diversity in your diet also sends a message to the farmers and the agriculture system, because we're all part of the system, to grow those things. And having biodiversity, having diversity in our farms so that we're not just growing the one thing is really great for soil. And we're running out of soil.
I love in your book,
Yeah.
I was going through your recommendations of what you should have in your pantry, and one of them I think was bitter melon. And I was like, I don't think I've ever cooked with bitter melon in my life, so that's what I'm going to go look for. I'm going to go over to Chinatown and see if we can find some.
Yeah, you can, and it's easy enough to cook. Like if you, I don't have a recipe for bitter melon, but it's really great. And the thing with trying something new is it doesn't need to be something brand new ever before. Like you don't need to all go out and buy bitter melon, but
you
try
should.
something. But try something new from the day before, because that's really good for your belly. And when we feel good, we can get a lot done.
Nice. Well, now we can, if anyone has any questions, we can open up the questions for Puneeta. Feel free just to raise a hand. Okay. Yes, let me start yourself there.
Well, first of all, thank you both so much for this talk, and thank you, Puneeta, for being here today. Really curious how your background in tourism might have opened your eyes to some of these issues, or even conversely, in your experience, were there ever chefs that had certain practices kind of really championing this effort that inspired you along your own path?
Yes. So yes.
Good answer.
My background in tourism really opened my eyes. I mean, I did the economics and then I did the master's in tourism, and then I started traveling. I used to work for a brief moment in time, which was really 8 years, with British Airways. And I had the joy and the privilege of traveling to various places. But a lot of the learning that I had about cooking and cooking practices came from my mom and my grandparents, and you'll see that in the book. But I feel there's a lot of traditional wisdom, and science stands on the shoulders of a lot of that wisdom too. And it kind of comes together at dinner time for me, because I use techniques and practices in a way that I grew up learning from my mom, and now I've got this lens of how can we make things more sustainable on it. I hope that answered your questions.
Hi, Lisa from Blue Sky Climate. Thank you so much. I can't wait. I have a naturopath daughter. This is going to her for her birthday gift. So
It is a great gift.
oh yeah, I'm so excited. You've done a lot of research for this book. What gives you hope right now?
Oh, gosh. Well, events like yesterday, we had the opening for the Toronto Climate Week. Yesterday. I'm a writer now, and I'm an entrepreneur. So my team is a team of one. And oftentimes, the work that I'm doing is on my own, blinkered writing. So gatherings like this, where I know everybody gets it already, gives me hope. Like there's so many of us, there are hundreds of thousands of us who are wanting to make a difference in their lives today. There's this research that was done, again, my background in research and economics, but there's this research that was done, it's called the 89% Project. In that research, they actually brought together research that was done in, I think, 130 countries or some such. It's called the 89% Project, if anybody Googles it. But it found out that 89% of people want to see stronger climate action from their leaders, from themselves, from their municipalities, like 89% across the board, of which, and I might get this number wrong, so someone please fact check me, but I think like 71% or 69%, let's go with that, it's the lower number. 69% were willing to actually put their own money. They were willing to pay more of a tax, so they were willing to put, I think, 1% of their income, their daily income, if it made a difference. So that, numbers like that are so hopeful to people who are just typing away on them.
We've got time for one last question. I think Sarah, you organized half the event this year. We ought to give you the last word here.
Thank you. So a big theme that I'm dialed into is we know we're all in the room because we believe in climate, or we've been brought by a friend who says, hey, come listen. But food's such a good medium to go and learn and get people involved. And you talked a little bit about how do you eat more intelligently for your carbon footprint. And I'm curious as to what is an actionable thing we can all take to someone in our life who is not already in climate to help them realize, their emissions, their carbon footprint, but through food.
Buy your book.
Yeah, well, buy my
It's a great gift if we haven't said that already.
Widely snapshot various pages from the big why. But I will say, is this someone who's far over the line on the other side?
Are they wearing red hats?
Yeah.
Not wearing hats, but just someone who isn't thinking about climate change and climate solutions as actively day to day. How can we use food to open up that conversation with them?
I call food my gateway drug for a reason. It opens the gate for so many conversations. I've had some of the best conversations over a meal. And there's something about connecting and having a conversation over just a meal that opens the conversations. And whether you're talking about, ingredients or where they were grown, or why mangoes and they're not local, but they're still mangoes and they're delicious and they fill my cup, or why only, the cold storage apples. There's a conversation to be had, even with the people in the red hats. I feel there's a conversation to be had with everyone at this point, because it's not something that we can deny, like wildfires. We have a wildfire this week and it's October already. So it's evident that, our planet is heating up and dramatically so.
Well, they say we're just borrowing from our children.
Yes, we're borrowing from our children. And we have to pass the planet on in the same condition that we received it.
Agreed. Okay, well look, thank you so much, Puneeta. We really appreciate you having you.